I'm Charles,
I'm Emmanuel.
and you are listening to
Blight makes right.
the original Legion of Everblight podcast.
And the crowd goes wild. I'm sorry. It's been a while since
Yeah,
we've been on the
we're
mic.
back.
I'm
We're
so
back,
excited.
baby. Like Terminator.
Yeah.
All right. So, what theme are we doing this week?
Oracles of Annihilation.
Oh my God. And this one's so fun because I feel like this is like the open-ended theme that may not have that like A-list right now, but a weird release could totally open this one up.
I really agree. Looking at it, I was really excited when it came out because, like, pre Oblivion, I was trying every way to shoehorn minions
Yeah,
into
yeah.
lists, and then they were like, "Oh, we're gonna give you a minions theme," and I was like, "Say what? You're
Yeah.
gonna you gonna give
Well,
me a
and I
minions
just
theme?"
gave you a bunch of Minions models when you
You
left
did.
Seattle,
Like
so
I
good
came to
timing.
Seattle, left with a whole like battle engine, bunch of gators, bunch of croak raiders. I'm gonna play the shit out of this theme.
Nice, nice. All right, well, let's go ahead and talk about what the Oracle's themes look like now. So I'm gonna put that on you. So, I just want to hear your sultry voice.
I miss you too, Charles. So the new Oracle's theme includes Legion Warlocks, non-character war beasts, Proteus, model units with magic ability, spawning vessels, Beast Mistress solos, Blightedness Shepherd solos, Incubi solos, and Spell Martyr solos. The army, now this is really important, can include any number of minion units, minion solos, and minion battle engines that will work for Legion. These models and units can be included even if they have the Partisan Legion solo. Additionally, for your requisition points, one Legion command attachment, one Blightedness Sorceress and Hellion solo, 5 Incubi solos, or one small or medium based Legion solo. And our special rules, minion models in the army are blighted models. And when a living small base minion warrior model is destroyed by an enemy attack, collateral damage, or continuous effect, you can replace it with an incubus model as if it were a faction model. When enemy models ends its activation within 2 inches of a blighted model in the army, the enemy model suffers continuous corrosion effect. And friendly model units can begin the game affected by the upkeep spells of warlocks in the army. So we got 3 really cool benefits out of this one.
Yeah, so one of the things that I liked that jumped out at me right away was the fact that oracles couldn't take incubi as their free option before. And so even though like I'm gonna preface all of this with I'm not sure there's an A list in oracles right now. But that doesn't mean there isn't some fun things to do and there isn't potentially some cool lists that you could bring to local tournaments. Or maybe that interesting off list that's going to catch people at guard at a bigger event, but I'm not sure an Oracle's list is going to be taking any major tournaments just yet. Might open up to that, but still, there's some cool things to build with. And getting to take your tech from Children of the Dragon and then stick it into Oracles does open up some new shenanigans.
I'm really excited for this theme too. I have to say, the one thing that jumped off the page at me right away was more than one minion solo or unit. Like, the problem with most minions and putting them into lists is you can't bring the support that makes them better. You can't
Yeah.
bring multiples of a good solo. You can't bring multiples of a good unit. And so a lot of times they're just that cherry on top. But in this theme, they can be the whole backbone. And I'm really excited for that. I think both of us came up with some really interesting lists for this.
Well, I think one of just the baseline things that you're going to be able to do with oracles, I think Gobber Chef is an unappreciated solo.
Definitely.
Because you often are going to take a misspeaker, or maybe you need feral guys, or there's so many other key solos that you want to bring. A lot of the time, Gobber Chef just doesn't make the cut when you can only take one. But I
Exactly.
think that is going to open this up where you could see lists like I'm going to take misspeaker, I'm going to take the Hermit, and I'll take Gobber Chef. Like that could be
Get
a
Eilish
reality.
in there so you can get re-rolls and unbinding on the same model? Yes, please.
Shenanigans. Yeah, and then obviously the incubi can pop out of your random minions. So
Yes.
I mean, not like a huge over like it's not OP, but it's cool.
It's useful. I can't tell you. So, like, in playing Children of the Dragons pre-Oblivion, I ran plenty of minions, and I
Hmm.
also ran Incubi, and I can't tell you how many times I was thinking, man, if this one minion model could just pop out an Incubi, I could contest that flag. And now, not a problem.
Yep, for sure. So, well, I'm gonna jump right in because I got,
Please
got
do.
my Fagros shirt on. So
What?
I think if there's one warlock, and I'm pretty sure you and I agree on this, if there's one warlock that you're like, if you're gonna see this theme, like what warlock is gonna jump out a lot of people, and I think it's Thagsy one, right?
Without a doubt.
Um, and so I remember somebody in Discord was like, there's nobody who wants to run 3 battle engines, and I was like, hold
Excuse
my
me?
beer. And so I liked running Sacro Vault with Thags back in the day. So I immediately started going to town. And so I came up with Thagrosh, Prophet of Everblight,
Mhm.
my favorite Urukai Sith Lord. Um, Typhon, Carnivian as his battle group. And then double Throne and one Sacro Vault with one Spell Martyr, 2 free packages of Incubi, and then Hex Hunters with Bale.
Mm.
And so I'd say, looking at this list, one of the first things that I don't like is I have only one unit. And
Mhm.
so that is potentially a flaw of this, but it does pack a lot of work in because you're going to be able to feet back Typhon or Carnivian. You potentially have 4 sprays you can put on something. You have the thrones and their meatiness with his aura. And then you have the Sacral Vault potentially like protecting things from spells, like putting another gunshot in, sniping out solos, collecting souls from the Hex Hunters. Um, and so I obviously, and it's got the normal tech of like, Fog of War helps the Hex Hunters. And so this was just kind of like a core
Mhm.
baseline if of something that I thought could definitely run the Sacral Vault. And I also like that it's harder to push around battle engines. So some of the lists that are pretty reliant on pushing models could have some problems with this. But so what are your thoughts? What do you like? What do you think about my list?
I love it. When you first shared it to me, I was like, "Oh, damn. I really like this list for a couple different reasons. Like I've always kind of seen the Thagrosh plus Hex Hunter and Incubi package as like the perfect picket line for a good shooting list, right?
Hmm.
Because you have a caster who can commit a beast to melee, then bring him back later to shoot. You have a good picket line that keeps recurring to keep things off of you, and now you have 3 battle engines, which 2 of them have sprays and can go in there and engage as well, and you can continue to push that hardcore attrition and protect them under the aura. But then you also add in the Sacro Vault, who has a really solid gun and a really good aura. So I think it adds a lot of tech, and I enjoy it quite a bit. I was pretty impressed. And
Yeah,
3 battle engines is hard to kill under Thags.
yeah,
So.
and one weird thing that you could do with this, if you wanted to play Veil 1, you could take this same list, switch Typhon for Proteus,
Hmm.
and I think the Incubi end up doing really wonderful things with her feet, and the Hex Hunters being able to like charge up Shadowbind stuff and then move backwards with her feet. And then she can kind of hang out near the Sacral Vault for some little extra protection, and then the Thrones getting to move with her feet. I mean, I think you could. I'm not sure it's great, but I think it's interesting.
Mm,
But I'm sure you have some Thags list for sure, like Big
I
Daddy
do.
Thags.
So I have a couple of them, but there was yeah,
This is the one painted by Jason Watt, by the way. He's
so
just gonna hang
sexy.
out, right?
So I have 2 different Thags lists, and I went in completely different directions with both of them, based on some different tech that we have available. The first one that I went with is basically a list that is designed to do one specific thing really well, and that's blind the hell out of your whole army. So in my list, I have Thagrosh 1, Typhon and a Nephilim Protector. I have Under Chief Meyer, the Draco Dial on Under Chief Meyer. Oh
Oof.
yeah. 2 Primal
This
Archons.
is jank. By the way, the bus has stopped. We are now in Janktown.
Oh man, I'm
Mayor
gonna
of
roll.
Janktown is Mr. Emanuel Class. He is
What?
also all of the city council members.
It's true. I roll down the window and yell at myself on the street as I ride by on the bus. Um, so the double primal archons, double incubi, which are part of my requisitions, 2 spell martyrs, Blightedness, Hex Hunters, and Bale, and which is also the third requisition. So there are a couple different things that really I wanted to do here immediately. Under Chief Meyer with the Draco Dial, right? So under Chief Meyer gets stealth because he has Prowl and Thagrosh has Fog of War. He has his 2 clouds to block line of sight to himself. He has the Dracodile's Animus to make it really hard to get into him, and his Caustic Mist can prevent troops from getting in on him. So this package by itself is just a really nasty package because Dracodile's spray has blind attached to it on top of everything else it does. The Nephilim Protector is kind of squeezed in there as that extra beast, but it's also there to help protect Under Chief Meyer and the Dracodile from like big guns or eyeless sight guns or anything that's going to really try to hunt them. Double Primal Archons. So the Primal Archon's really interesting in that by itself it's a pretty self-sustained package. It's got a PAL 15 and 2 PAL 14s. It's armor 19 with tough, but under Thags' aura goes up to 21 because, you know, it's a -2 strength aura, so it just kind of benefits everything. That's one of the reasons we mentioned Thags being so good for a minions list, is that a lot of his stuff still affects your minions as well. It's got countercharge to make dealing with everything that much more difficult on top of all the blind. Divine Manifestation, since Thags doesn't necessarily have a to hit buff, and doesn't necessarily want to deal with like things being knocked down or anything like that, it's really nice. He has Hyper Regeneration to heal itself, Reality Anchor, so you can't summon things around him. Just that little cherry on top on the tech. But really here, there
Just
are
so you
two
can annoy
things.
Chandler.
Totally.
Yeah.
100%. But there are 2 things I put him in the list for specifically, other than just being a big beefy model with lots of boxes
Bottle.
and bottle.
Manuel's been drinking.
Indeed. The gin is good. So it has Rolling Earth. Whenever an enemy model advances and ends its movement within 3 inches of the model, the enemy model suffers blind. So now I have multiple instances of blind between the Dracodile and Rolling Earth that are pretty easy to get onto people and also really mess up order of activations. And it has Earthshaker on its horn, so it has a knockdown AoE, which is something that Thags really wants because it helps his to hit ability. And then Beat Back on the Claws is kind of a nice added scenario bonus. The double Incubi plus Blightedness, Hex Hunter, Bale package gives me the ability to have a really good strong picket line, allow me to make multiple turns out of my sprays from Typhon and the Dracodile, get my Primal Archons into position, and then guess what? They have blind on a stick too. So you crash into my picket line, and then as you kill them, they spawn Incubi. But as they spawn Incubi, the models that are there basically just there to keep dotting as much blind as possible to reduce defense and try to make things either less efficient by having to shake blind or just lock them into place. Then the Primal Archons get up in there, and the Rolling Earth just means if you're too close to them, you get blinded, and then they can knock things down on top of that. So you can have a model that has to double shake between blind and knockdown, and then you have Typhon and the Dracodile to anchor the list, and Typhon can kind of fastball initially. You throw it out there with excessive healing and just let them chew through Typhon, and then feed him back, and then let him do it again. So that's my first list. What do you think, Charles?
I think you don't like having friends. No, I think...
Yeah. You're my only friend, Charles. We all know this.
It's a unique friendship. It's interesting. So one of the things that I like is I remember when Underchief Meyer started hitting, I was looking at him and going like, you know, the ability to run him and not lose out on taking other solos, I think is definitely interesting.
Yes.
I will say it's hard for me to judge this specific list because it's so many models that I have not played. Like, you've got the Archons, you've got the Dracodile. I don't know what to think about this one. Like, I would look down at this and I'm just like, I don't know if this is going to wreck me or if it's going to wreck itself. I really don't know.
I think it definitely needs some play testing, but it's got out for troops, it's got out for armor, it's got out for control, it's got out for scenario, and then Thagrosh is just really tough to kill and a great anchor. All around, I find the list really interesting. I'm definitely going to have to play it and see how it goes.
No, that's totally fair. You know, it's funny, just thinking about your list did get me thinking about things that can run. So I like the idea of Meyer being able to take a Wrestler, right? Giving you access to Rage is really sweet. Obviously, that's why Scorn is freaking out. And so you do now have the ability that if you wanted to take Underchief Meyer to be like creating a cool cloud wall or to protect a caster now, and you're going to you have to take some sort of beast on him, so you want to maximize its work. The ability to take Underchief Meyer with a Wrestler with Wrong Eye and Snapjaw, so that the Wrestler can potentially rage Snapjaw, and something with like Lilith 1. I haven't completely fledged out like what this list would look like, but there's kind of 15 points to play with. But I was thinking about Lilith 1, Archangel. I like Archangel in this particular theme, especially with Lilith. I think it's a good centerpiece beast for her.
Definitely.
And then you take Meyer with a Wrestler, Wrong Eye and Snapjaw, a unit of Croak Raiders, lots of synergy with her and the Archangel. And then Underchief Meyer can go ahead and drop the Weld Secrets on them, so that they ignore concealment and cover. So, they become pretty hyper accurate, even though they don't benefit from her feat. He's got a Toon Spirit, so he can cast Rage for free once per turn. I think there's a lot of interesting stuff there. And then obviously like Gobber, the Swamp Gobbers. So you have another cloud that you can potentially manipulate and help give Lilith stealth. And you got 15 points to play with. I think for something where you want to experiment with all these random ass minions, like I don't know what to think. I haven't played Meyer yet. He seems cool, but I don't have a lot of personal experience with him.
Last time I was in Milwaukee and I got to meet one of the main guys, Brian, from at Disciples of Agony, I picked up an Underchief Meyer. I happened to go stop on one of the game shops, and it was like shining. I looked at the shelf, and there it was. And I was like, oh my. Yes, please come to daddy. And ever since then, I've been trying to figure out ways to shoehorn him in the list. I think he's really valued for what he does and the diversity that he can bring. And for Legion, the access to minion beasts is really interesting because they're so different and diverse from what we have already. So you may see me run him with a bunch of Bone Swarms, and the next week put him on a Dracodile, and the next week have a couple Wrestlers. Like, it's
who knows?
Money.
I do think if you're going to go that direction, I do think Lilith becomes an interesting option, because obviously she's Parasite on a stick, right?
Yeah,
like that's one of the best things that she does, and she's range support for your army, and that can all benefit in minions. Like the only thing the minions really lose out on is that they're not going to get her feet, which is okay. Like I actually like the idea of saving her feet real late game, like in a list like that, where you're just like, Archangel and her are going to take advantage of this feat in a really late, like maybe they're going for an assassination, right? Like she's just going to pop some shots into somebody, and the Archangel's going to pop shots into them. And, you hope for one Croak Raider that just like oils them. And so suddenly you have this hyper accurate, end game plan. But,
I really like it on Incubi, like especially after your opponent has crashed into your jam, and you're like, oh, my Croak Raiders start popping Incubi, and then I'm like, oh, I feat, and now they get 2 attacks on your parasited target with boosted to hit. Bye-bye.
Oh, that's the thing I was like, should also mention that list. Obviously, you're going to requisition and take double Incubus. And I think maybe Kralix as a free option in a list like that. I like the fact that he can debuff things for the minions as well.
Fair. I don't like Kralix. I think he's too expensive. But as a requisition point, and if you're looking for that third little cherry, sure, why not?
Yeah, he's not my favorite by any means.
I just find him super corner case. Like, and I've said this on the forums, and I've said this on Discord, and I've actually received some pretty interesting backlash for it. People seem to be really attached to him. But in my experience, putting him on the table, it's like, oh, is it living? Well, then maybe I have an out.
Yes. Well, so talking about a list that's a little less like way out there, and something that I think has, a little less crazy, a little less janktown. So the bus is moving on a little. Like we're just one step outside of janktown. Also a Lilith list. One of the things I was putting together, again, thinking about things that can run the Sacrovault, was Lilith with a succubus and an archangel. Sacravault ends up being the other thing that can go in zones that beasts control. And then you've got 3 shepherds, double croak raiders, spawning vessel, ice witches, and then you've got 3 incubus packages for free. And so you've got 20 croak raiders that AD, and then those can become 15 incubus, and you feed souls to the Sacravault, and you feed corpses to the spawning vessel, and then you get incubi. Like, it's a huge recycling package. And the ice witches can put puppet master onto the croak raiders.
Mm-hmm.
So you could potentially have both units of croak raiders benefiting from puppet master to at least get a couple pops, and they can still help out Lilith or the archangel or even the Sacravault. So that was something I thought was very interesting, and I liked how the points play out. And I feel like it's got, it only has 2, beast or battle engine, but they're big and they're probably going to be longer lasting pieces. But you've got a crap ton of solos and you've got multiple units. I definitely liked how that looked. At least that list looks on paper. On the table, I don't know yet.
I like the idea of being able to puppet master the Sacravault because it's got that really sexy gun, and there are just too many times you're like, I have one shot at this. Nope. And so being able to hedge your bets a little safer on that Sacravault seems really sexy.
Yep, I mean, I think fitting in ice witches in that theme is great. It's one of those hidden gems for it. But I also totally dragged us out of Janktown, and I imagine you probably even have an extra Thags list that we didn't even get a chance to get to.
Well, if you dragged us out of Janktown, I'm like the guy on the bus who hijacks it, speed style, and I'm like, we're going back to Janktown.
So wait, does that mean I become Keanu Reeves in this example? Sure. I'm looking after the bus?
If you say so.
Okay.
Well, so my other Thag list that you're talking about bodies and recycling, and that's one of my favorite themes within any game is recursion. And I always try to fit it into one of my lists as possible. And Charles, you've been podcasting with me for years, and so
too many years, probably.
Many, many years. You've heard me say it over and over again, but attrition values and the way the game is played is really skewed when you add recursion to it. Being able to add models back to the game, waste opponents' attacks. Like, if you had a card that read negate an X amount of opponent attacks, right? You'd totally use that all the fucking time. Well, models that die and come back are literally that. They say, let your opponent waste their resources on this, so that way they're inefficient. And when it comes to the attrition value, if this is a big slide, it keeps creeping higher and higher in your favor over time. So I was like, what can I do to really abuse the hell out of this? And so I took Thagrosh 1, Typhon, and a Seraph. And then I took, for my requisition points, 3 pods of Incubi, and a Blightedness Shepherd as my extra solo. 2 units of Croak Raiders, each with a Void Leech. 2 Gatorman Bokur and Bogtrog Shambler units, and then 2 spawning vessels. And basically the concept is make my opponent cry. Just let them
weep terrible tears of pain.
I've got 15 free solos in the list, so flags aren't an issue. I've got 4 units of bodies in the list that recur, and then I've got ways to make additional war beasts if I need to have them go contest. The Croak Raiders both benefit for Typhon and Seraph's guns, and then additionally, those Void Leeches, since they're AD, allow them to stay a little less molested by those early game spells or things that your opponent wants to put on them to make them less useful or less accurate. And then as they die, they create incubi, and your Gatorman Bokur and Swamp Shamblers catch that package. But we're going to get some double dipping here, because right behind that are my spawning vessels. And one of the interesting thing about spawning vessels is the way that their ability recycle works. It says when a living or undead model is destroyed within 4 inches of the model, add a corpse. So you're getting it from the Shamblers, you're getting it from the Incubi, you'll get it, people are like, oh, aren't you worried about bodies? I'm like, no, I'm going to have more bodies than I possibly know what to do with for all of these. I'm going to be maxed out on tokens most of the time. And so early game is going to feel like your opponent's just beating the hell out of you. It's me very quick style. You're just losing models in droves and trying to contest and trying to take what you can. But eventually, that attrition slide is going to come back in your favor. And then I go, I've started to lose models without sustaining, and you've started to sustain and put models back on the table. And when that happens, things start to flip around. Now you're beating on your opponent because you've defeated back Typhon. You've now got 2 maxed out units of Gatorman Bokers who can go in there, and one can stationary a target so the other one can run in and get a bunch of auto hitting attacks on him over and over and over again as he sacrifices all of his Shamblers, only to be replenished by Incubi. Like, it's just so much body, so many bodies, so much recursion on the table, and it deals with all 3 scenario elements really well. It's got guns, it's got control, it's got offensive output, it's got a ton of attacks. So if you're looking for a good list to pair with, like, say, a really hard-hitting, beast-heavy list, where you've got, like, a really strong Primal Terror's Armor Cracker list, this is the list that goes, oh, you brought lots of troops? I can kill that. Oh, you want to play this to the long game and see how it goes on the scenario? I can play that. Oh, you brought a bunch of shooting shit? Waste your guns. I'll get there eventually.
So hear me out. I like this concept. What if we switched it from Thags to Lilith 1, and you swap the Beast for Archangel, and because she got more points, you actually gain a Shepherd in the process, and then she gets to Parasite for all of this bullshit, and then she's always going to have transfer targets because you just keep making fucking lesser War Beasts.
Yeah, it's a really sexy option too. I mean, obviously these are the kind of, like, Lilith 1 and Thagrosh 1 are going to be your quintessential inputs into Oracles of Annihilation. And I like the idea. I think the one thing that holds me back from just jumping into the Lilith train is that Thagrosh also feeds back a beast. So there's no reprieve for you to attack. It's like, oh, you want to attack my beast? I'll feed it back. You want to attack my troops? They recur. You want to attack anything? I'm going to get it back. There's no safe spot to attack.
Oh, for sure. It was just, I keep thinking, like, you have so much recursion in the list that I just want to make, like, all of, I was thinking what casters make that package more functional.
For sure.
And obviously he has Fog of War, which is going to help some of these things last a little bit longer, but he doesn't really do a whole lot for, like, he doesn't care that much about the lessers. He doesn't do that much for the Shamblers or the Raiders or the Incubi outside of benefiting from Fog of War, because he can only put Draconic Blessing on, like, 1 Incubi. So that's really going to go on a Beast or him or something like that. And it's just, since so much of the list and so much of its work is there, I was just looking at it and going, what casters would do more to, like, make all of them more effective? And
so there's one little sneaky piece of tech in here I haven't shared, and I was like, maybe not yet. I need to play test this a little more to make sure I feel as confident about it as I do. But here's the thing. With as many lessers as you can spawn over the course of the game, say 3 or 4, maybe more, pop out some Blight Wasps, because Thags can give them +2 strength. They get a cumulative bonus, and then they can get Killing Spree. So now you have your lessers who are suddenly threatening things and making it so you're like, oh, do I have to deal with that swarm? Because functionally, they work better together. And the more your opponent ignores them, the deadlier they get.
Interesting. Okay. I mean, I functionally, I like what it would do on the table. And you just might have a problem that not you have the problem. Your opponents may have the problem that you may just not be able to kill this list in 60 minutes.
That's very true, too. It seems very mill deck in that it could probably make your opponent just make attacks until they lose.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I'm trying to imagine a list that has the ability to, like, snipe out key pieces like the spawning vessels, but I'm just not sure that that is going to exist.
Well, and say you're trying to snipe out the spawning vessels, right? So you got them under Fog of War, and you have waves of bodies in front of all your girls. So the only thing maybe you can shoot at is the vessel itself. And then you have your beasts that can block line of sight. You can even use your brokers to block line of sight, who can then pawn damage off to the Shamblers. There's some tech you can do.
Oh, for sure. I think especially if someone isn't prepared for it, I don't think they're gonna, like, because it's gonna be deceptive, right? There's potentially a crap ton more Shamblers that can go on the table. You're gonna, like, see the army, but you're not really seeing the 15 Incubi, and you're not imagining all of those random lesser war beasts that are potentially popping out.
Definitely. You can probably spawn between 15 and 20 models every game.
You know, again, This could, I mean, this is even more out there. This might be like we're on a roundabout in Janktown, just like visiting like different
We're stopping off
Janktown.
at the ice cream shop
Right,
now
right,
and
right.
getting some Rocky Road.
One of the interesting things would be to play something like this with Thagrosh 2.
Mm.
Right? Obviously, you might expand the beast package a little bit, but I like the ability for him late game to have access to the lessers and suddenly be kind of invincible.
Yeah. Well,
Or be
go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, like, you have the potential for late game feat shenanigans with shredders and stuff.
Definitely.
And you kind of almost anchor the list with Thags and almost behaves a little bit like a old school Sam Ross Terminus list where it's just like, yeah, just keep fighting all this stuff. Yeah, just do it. Joe, go ahead. Fight that stuff.
Eventually,
Fight
Thags
it.
will get
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. And then after you've chewed through all of this stuff, suddenly it's like you're low on time and you're dealing with Thags.
I agree. You and me, you can tell we're Blight brothers. We've been doing this a long time. Because I was thinking something similar. Like, the longer the game goes, the better it gets for Thags. Because the more lessers he gets to put on the table. The problem with, like, say, running a lesser swarm is that they die easily. Your opponent
Yeah.
can go, okay, well, you've got 6 lessers. I could probably kill 6 lessers in a turn. No sweat. But now you go, okay, now that you've chewed through my whole army, I still have 6 lessers in Thagrosh. And suddenly you feat and your opponent just dies because they can't block enough lanes. They can't stop Thags plus all the shredders or stingers or blight wafts or whatever you happen to run in. I really like it.
Yeah. It's
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 fun.
definitely interesting. So we've talked about Thagrosh and Lilith 1, right? Both of those
Hmm.
come to mind a lot for an Oracles list. Is there any other casters you think that we should potentially be considering for this theme? Well, I suppose we did kind of like shove Thagrosh 2 in just a little bit, but for people who are wanting to explore this, I mean maybe Rias 1 could be
Okay.
interesting in here, right? Like she could I mean, I'm not sure she wants to do as much with the minions, but she could still put occultation on a unit of hex hunters, right? And have bail for free, and then they can with dash, you potentially like have incubi ignoring free strikes and moving further. There could be something interesting there. And again, I think maybe an archangel or a blightbringer starting off the battle group.
I think there's some interesting potential there. If I were going to reach for another caster, especially putting on the spot like this, it'd probably be Fayana too. Because I really like her with Wrong Eye and Snapjaw, and now you can expand that package. You can bring Under Chief Meyer and a Wrestler and make Wrong Eye and Snapjaw deadlier. You can bring a solid beast package with her and then support it with great minion solos like Eilish and still also bring Wrong Eye and Snapjaw. So I think there's a lot of potential for her to find a happy median where she can be like completely dominating one side of the table with her and her battle group, and then the other side of the table can just push with minions.
Yeah, and one other thing that would potentially, Absalonia 1 used to have a big home in Oracle simply for beginning the game with her, the upkeep
Free
spells.
upkeeps, yeah,
And
definitely.
so, since functionally, like a lot of the things that she was trying to do before, you still could do. So you could definitely have a list that starts off with whatever battle group you want for Absalonia 1, play something a little bit more battle group heavy. Probably, I think she does like an Archangel, or she could totally take a Blightbringer. But now you can still get a bunch of free shit and squeeze in a unit of Hex Hunters. She doesn't do as much for them, but it could still give her bodies to shove in people's faces and then get incubi that give her lots of things that can control zones. So there might be a list there too. I didn't really have a chance to punch in the numbers, and I'm not sure what I want the battle group to look like. I think in this era, because of Grimkin and clocks being such a problem, I do think Absalonia 1 is going to get a fair amount of play, both versions of Absalonia for a Grievous Wounds Proteus. Um, but there might also be a list where people do want access to Proteus. And I will admit, when I was first looking at this and I'm going, I already barely want to take Proteus with Absalonia. I can't imagine taking her with taking that beast without Absalonia. But in this world of clocks, like they do make Proteus, because even without grievous wounds, he pulls a clock in, and then if it time stutters away, he just tentacles it again and brings it right back.
Without a doubt. I like it. I like the idea of Abby 1 specifically, but Abby 2 also has some room here. We talked about kind of the late game push with making a bunch of lessers, and she can really make lesser shine. But Abby 1, right? So typically she does nothing for her infantry. And for the most part, Legion likes its casters to try to push their infantry a little bit over the edge. And so going in and
She
saying, I
can
have
still refuge bail. Let's give her
yeah,
that.
she still can refuge bail. Um, I like the idea of having a really solid battle group and then potentially having minions supported by minions to go in there so that she doesn't have to support them. And then even like let's take that a step further, right? So one of the common things to do with Abby 2 was to take a bunch of Ravagors, shoot your opponent, force them into you, and then have her like support those Ravagors and make them melee beaters. Well, now you can add in double incubi or the double croak raiders with incubi who can make those Ravagors gunshots really punish your opponent, give you a picket line so that you can get into position, and then your Ravagors can go to town.
Yeah. Another potential option there is if you want to squeeze in Meyer with her, like allowing her or like Proteus to basically refuge behind a cloud wall. Like he goes up, murders a
Mm.
clock, then refuges back, and then Meyer moves up and like clouds in front of them.
Yeah, solid.
Just interesting tech. Again, I don't think Oracles has like a this is a list that's going to come right out and be really effective in the meta. But I do think there's probably going to be some random local tournaments where someone's going to like just people are not going to be ready for an Oracles list. And I would not put it past JVM to pull some random uh, Oracles of Annihilation shit out of his ass for some random tournament. And I say random tournament, it'll be like War Machine Weekend or something.
Well, I
But
like the idea that Oracles brings the option so that casters can focus on whatever. Like originally, Oracles was our beast package faction tier, right? So
mhm.
we looked at Oracles and said, run all the beasts with it and just be happy. Well, now we can run all the beasts and also have minion packages that are self-sufficient and supported by other minions doing their thing. I think it just got better. Like
Yeah.
it got more well-rounded and more focused on doing what you needed to do without taking away from the things that the Legion other tiers already do.
Well, and it's more versatile now that you can actually run some infantry and you aren't like forced into all of the beasts. Like now you can still run a very heavy beast list. You give other warlocks access to Proteus, which does matter now. And, being able to like have that incubi package so you can, even if you're just doing something at a more minimum level where you're just taking like one unit and then you use like one of your requisitions to get 5 incubi, that is still going to be pretty effective. So,
Absolutely.
so anyway, but I think we've talked about the Oracle stuff that we need to talk about. It's a fun one. This is kind of I think of it like that magic card. Like I know that WotC when they design sets, they specifically put in some like question mark pieces, like that random artifact where you look at it and go, well, that's garbage. Until something else comes out, and then it combos with that garbage artifact, and suddenly it's not so garbage anymore.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think that is kind of, I feel like, the design structure with Oracles, where it's very much like, what could happen with this down the road? So I think it'll be the thing that you kind of have to come back every once in a while and go, has Oracles changed? Has any of the new stuff suddenly made Oracles significantly better?
So while we're on that topic, if I were going to see one thing introduced into Legion that would make me really happy, I would like to see more things act on Blighted. They literally gave us a whole nother like phrase, like a whole nother word that's never been added to another card before, right?
Well, it
Nothing,
has. There are cards that say blighted. But
sure, but we've
giving that to
never
the
added
minions,
that to something else.
yeah, it is mostly a penalty right now because it basically just means that like Lanissa and stuff gets additional die against them. Like there's not very many situations where I can't think of a situation where blighted is a bonus. But I mean LOS was right where um if you played Animag in this theme and you brought like an Ogren Bokur, it becomes a blighted Ogren and then triggers her benefits.
Huh. I hadn't thought about that, but
Yeah,
that's adorable.
Yeah, it is confirmed that that works. So, like, if you bring in an Ogryn Bokur or Gudrun, they are now blighted Ogryn models, so they
Hmm.
can trigger her free spell. If you wanted to play her in this, I'm not really sure you want to, but
It's adorable, but I
yeah,
would love to see more things that interact with Blighted on our side. I mean, Blight is literally what we do. We don't even, like, how are we paying minions? We pay them in Blight.
yeah.
So I would love to see a caster who's like the minion caster to come out and be like, I'm the Blight handler who shovels the Blight down their gatory throats.
Well, we could always get some sort of solo that like has things that benefits like friendly faction or blighted minion models. That
Sexy.
could be sexy. All right. Well, I think we should wrap up this episode. This has been fun. So, listeners, thank you for tuning in to another episode of Blight Makes Right and listening to our shenanigans. And I'm sure some of you are like, Oracles is garbage. And it might be, but you know, we're gonna we're gonna have fun with our toys regardless. And the thing is not everybody is at the top tier level of competitive play, and sometimes they just want to bring something that people don't expect to their store. And I think there is at least interesting stuff in here to explore. So anyway,
Definitely. Can I
but
say it this time?
yeah, go ahead. It's all you.
Well, fans, Blight's out.